I'm Samantha Wilson, 34, and last Friday I watched my sister Rachel destroy our relationship forever. The board meeting was supposed to be routine until she orchestrated the ambush. The board voted unanimously. "You're out." Rachel smirked, flipping her perfect blonde hair. "I'm the new CEO now." My stomach dropped, but I kept my composure. "Congratulations." Just one thing though. Check page 394 of the company contract. Her smile faltered. She had no idea what was coming. If you're watching this from your office, home, or during your commute, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories about business betrayals and ultimate comebacks. Rachel and I grew up in Boston with our parents who were middle-class working professionals. From early childhood, the differences between us were stark. I was the responsible one, always with a book in hand, planning and organizing everything from family vacations to school projects. Rachel, 2 years younger, was the charismatic favorite who could charm anyone with her infectious laugh and quick wit. Our father, a small business owner, spent weekends teaching me about profit margins and customer acquisition when I showed interest. Meanwhile, my mother, who had been burned in a business partnership years before, always whispered caution in my ear. "Trust, but verify. Always read the fine print, Samantha." College was transformative for me. While studying computer science and business at MIT, I discovered my passion for healthcare technology. The inefficiencies in medical data management appalled me, especially after witnessing my grandfather struggle through a misdiagnosis because his records were scattered across 3 different hospitals. The solution seemed obvious to me: a unified, secure platform where healthcare providers could access patient information seamlessly while maintaining strict privacy controls. Getting funding for Wilson Tech was my first major hurdle. Venture capitalists loved the concept, but questioned whether a 24-year-old woman with no healthcare background could execute such an ambitious plan. I heard no 57 times before getting a small seed investment from a former professor who believed in me. Those early days were brutal. I worked as a consultant during the day and built my platform at night. My apartment became my office, with whiteboards covering every wall. I lived on ramen and coffee, pouring every spare dollar into server costs and legal fees to ensure HIPAA compliance. My dating life was non-existent, and friends stopped calling after I missed too many gatherings. The breakthrough came unexpectedly when a small community clinic in Cambridge agreed to pilot my system. Their office manager, Jessica Fletcher, took a chance on me after experiencing the nightmares of their existing software. When they reported a 40% reduction in administrative time after just 1 month, I knew I had something valuable. Rachel showed zero interest in my company during those grueling first 2 years. She'd roll her eyes whenever I discussed database architecture or interoperability challenges at family dinners. "God, Sam, do you ever talk about anything but your boring tech stuff?" she'd complain while texting under the table. She was building her own career in marketing, working for glamorous fashion brands and attending industry parties that she documented extensively on social media. Everything changed when Wilson Tech secured our first major hospital contract. Suddenly, my little project was worth several $1 million, and industry publications were featuring my innovation. Rachel's interest peaked immediately. She started asking questions about the business, offering marketing suggestions, and even bringing up Wilson Tech to our parents unprompted. When my marketing director quit unexpectedly before a crucial product launch, Rachel positioned herself as the perfect replacement. "I know branding, Sam. I understand how to make technical products appealing to non-technical people. Plus, who better to trust than family?" Against my better judgment and despite my mother's cautionary words echoing in my head, I brought Rachel on as our chief marketing officer with a generous compensation package and small equity stake. The warning signs appeared almost immediately. Rachel hired her friends from previous jobs without proper interviews. She insisted on a complete office redecoration to reflect our brand values, spending thousands on designer furniture when we should have been conserving cash. When I questioned these decisions, she dismissed my concerns with practiced ease. "You handle the tech. I'll handle our image. That's why you hired me, right?" Despite these red flags, I couldn't deny that Rachel brought valuable skills to Wilson Tech. Our marketing materials improved dramatically. Press coverage increased, and potential clients responded well to her polished presentations. I convinced myself that her excesses were worth tolerating for the sake of company growth and family harmony. This rationalization would prove to be my greatest mistake. The 3 years following Rachel's arrival marked exponential growth for Wilson Tech. Our client base expanded from a handful of clinics to over 30 mid-sized hospitals across New England. Revenue increased by 300%. And our team grew from 12 people working in a cramped office to 65 employees occupying an entire floor in a Cambridge office building with views of the Charles River. Our flagship product, Patient Connect, revolutionized how medical facilities managed patient information. The platform's strength lay in its intuitive interface combined with military-grade security, aspects I had personally obsessed over during development. We won industry awards for innovation. And I was named to 40 under 40 lists in both healthcare and technology sectors. My leadership style fostered our success. I built a collaborative environment where ideas could come from anyone. But final decisions required data and logic rather than emotion or politics. Weekly all-hands meetings ensured transparency, and I made a point of knowing every employee's name and role. The technical teams respected my ability to roll up my sleeves and debug alongside them when needed, while the business teams appreciated my clear vision and unwavering ethics. Initially, Rachel's marketing contributions proved genuinely valuable. She rebranded our visual identity, making it more professional and trustworthy. Her press releases transformed technical achievements into compelling narratives about improving patient outcomes. She organized our presence at healthcare conferences with meticulous attention to detail, ensuring maximum visibility. For a while, we functioned as a perfect team, my technical expertise paired with her marketing savvy. Wilson Tech's culture reflected my core values: integrity, innovation, and impact. We maintained a patients-first mentality, remembering that behind every data point was a real person whose care might depend on our system working flawlessly. I instituted generous benefits, professional development allowances, and flexible work arrangements to attract and retain top talent. The resulting loyalty proved invaluable, though I wouldn't fully realize this until later. When MedTech Global, a healthcare conglomerate, offered $50 million to acquire Wilson Tech, I faced my first major disagreement with Rachel. The offer was tempting, life-changing money for both of us, but I believed we had barely scratched the surface of our potential. Our technology could help millions more patients if we maintained control over its development and implementation. Are you insane? Rachel had shouted when I told her I was declining the offer. $50 million, Sam. Do you know what we could do with that kind of money? It's not about the money, I tried explaining. It's about the mission. MedTech will bury our innovation in their bureaucracy or, worse, increase prices so much that smaller facilities can't afford it. God, you're so self-righteous sometimes, she had snapped. Not everything needs to be a noble crusade. Sometimes business is just business. The tension from that disagreement lingered, but I stood firm. Instead of selling, I focused on strengthening Wilson Tech's foundation for long-term independence. This included formalizing our corporate structure and creating comprehensive bylaws with the help of Lawrence Bennett, a brilliant corporate attorney I'd met through an entrepreneurship mentoring program. Lawrence spent weeks crafting our operating agreement, articles of incorporation, and shareholder agreements. During one late-night session reviewing documents, he raised an important question. Have you considered contingency plans if leadership disputes arise? You mean between Rachel and me? I asked. Family business partnerships can be complicated, he said carefully. It's best to plan for worst-case scenarios while relationships are still good. That conversation led to the creation of our company's most important document, a detailed contract that included special provisions about intellectual property, leadership succession, and dispute resolution. Page 394 contained my insurance policy, a clause establishing that the core patents and technology licenses were actually held by a separate entity I solely controlled, which merely licensed them to Wilson Tech under specific conditions, including my continued leadership role. Rachel signed the documents without reading them thoroughly, joking that she'd leave the boring legal stuff to me. Her dismissive attitude toward these critical details reflected our different approaches to business I built methodically with an eye toward protection, while she focused on appearance and immediate gains. Meanwhile, Rachel's influence with our board members grew steadily. We had assembled a 5-person board, including ourselves, 2 industry veterans, and a representative from our main investor. Rachel cultivated personal relationships with the other board members, organizing dinners and social outings to which I was often accidentally not invited until the last minute, when my calendar was already filled with technical meetings or client calls. While I focused on improving our product and expanding our technical capabilities, Rachel increasingly positioned herself as the company's public face. In interviews, she began using I instead of we when discussing company achievements. Photos of her appeared prominently in company materials and press features. Gradually, the narrative shifted from Wilson Tech being my innovative creation to it being the Wilson Sisters Company, and eventually, in some circles, Rachel Wilson's rising healthcare tech firm. I noticed these changes, but dismissed them as harmless marketing strategies. My priority remained building the best product possible, not fighting for public recognition. This oversight would prove costly. The first concrete sign of Rachel's betrayal came during a client meeting I wasn't scheduled to attend. Madison Clark, our lead developer, texted me afterward. "You should know Rachel took complete credit for the new security architecture. Said it was her vision and she guided the technical team. Didn't mention you once." I confronted Rachel that evening, and she expertly deflected with practiced innocence. "It's just simpler for clients to have one point of contact," she explained. "They get confused with too many names and roles. I always make sure the team gets credit internally." I accepted her explanation because I wanted to believe her. But Madison's concerned expression the next day told me she wasn't convinced either. Around this time, Rachel began having private lunches with our board members. Brian Taylor, our CFO, who had been with me since the early days, noticed the pattern. "They're always at Lucia's," he told me, referring to an expensive Italian restaurant near our office. Calendars are blocked off with vague descriptions like strategic discussion or long-term planning. When I asked Rachel about these meetings, she dismissed them as relationship building and changed the subject. Even more concerning were the meetings with competitors that appeared on her calendar as innocuous industry networking. Allison Sawyer, my executive assistant who had access to Rachel's schedule, quietly brought this to my attention after noticing recurring appointments with executives from MedCore Solutions, our biggest competitor. "Maybe it's nothing," Allison said, "but they've met 4 times in the last month." The company atmosphere subtly shifted. New hires brought in by Rachel formed a distinct faction within the office. They lunched together, socialized exclusively with each other, and often seemed to be working on projects that weren't in our main task management system. When questions arose in meetings, they would look to Rachel before responding, even when the questions fell under my purview as CEO. Longtime employees began stopping by my office with concerns. Tyler Patterson, our operations director, who had been with me since our community clinic days, closed my door one afternoon with an unusual seriousness. "People are confused about leadership direction," he said carefully. "Rachel's team is telling clients we're exploring acquisition options, but your all-hands message last month emphasized staying independent." I confronted Rachel immediately, and our argument echoed through the glass-walled conference room despite our efforts to keep voices down. She eventually backed down, claiming her team had misunderstood her messaging and promising to clarify our position on independence. We ended with a superficially resolved conflict and a hug that felt hollow. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying every interaction with my sister over the past year, searching for patterns I had missed. Rachel's exaggerated promises to clients became another troubling trend. Nathan Brooks, our client success manager, brought me a recording of a sales call where Rachel promised implementation timelines that our development team couldn't possibly meet. When I raised this with her, she accused me of not thinking big enough and undermining her authority. The conversation ended with her storming out of my office, leaving behind the unresolved issue of promises we couldn't fulfill. The financial reporting inconsistencies were what finally removed all doubt. While preparing for a quarterly board meeting, I noticed discrepancies between marketing expense reports and our actual bank transactions. Further investigation revealed Rachel had been categorizing personal travel as business expenses and routing certain vendor payments through companies owned by her friends at inflated rates. The amounts weren't large enough to trigger automatic audits, but demonstrated a pattern of deception that chilled me. Before I could determine how to address these findings, a mistakenly forwarded email revealed Rachel's true intentions. Late one night, while working from home, I received a message clearly intended for our board chairman, Douglas Reed. Rachel had accidentally included my email in the chain. The message outlined her case for removing me as CEO, citing my technical focus at the expense of business growth and resistance to strategic acquisition opportunities. The email ended with a detailed plan for the upcoming board meeting, where she intended to call for a vote on leadership change. My hands shook as I read her meticulous dismantling of my reputation and contributions. The sister I had trusted, promoted, and defended was systematically working to erase me from my own company. The betrayal felt physical, like actual pain in my chest. That night, I called Lawrence Bennett. "I need to know exactly what protections page 394 provides," I said after explaining the situation. "And I need to know what I should do next." Lawrence's calm voice provided a lifeline in my panic. "The IP protection clause is solid. If you're removed from leadership, the technology licensing agreement automatically converts to a limited, non-transferable license with significant restrictions and increased costs. It would make the company far less valuable instantly. Will that be enough to stop her?" I asked. "It depends on her goal," he said. "If she's planning to sell the company, this would significantly impact the purchase price. If she's looking for personal power, she might not care about long-term consequences." We spent hours developing a contingency plan, one that would protect both the company's core mission and my interests if Rachel succeeded in ousting me. Lawrence reminded me repeatedly about the importance of appearing to accept any board decision calmly while we implemented our counter-strategy. The night before the board meeting, Rachel called to suggest we grab dinner. "We haven't had sister time in ages," she said with unusual warmth. "Over expensive wine and pasta." She asked probing questions about my future plans and whether I ever thought about doing something completely different. Her confidence was unsettling. She ordered champagne before dessert and toasted to new beginnings, her eyes gleaming with barely contained excitement. I returned home knowing the next day would change everything. I barely slept. Instead, reviewing the contingency plan Lawrence and I had developed and preparing myself emotionally for what was to come. The morning of the board meeting dawned crisp and clear. A beautiful October day that belied the storm waiting inside our sleek conference room. I arrived early, as was my habit, to find the room already prepared with presentation materials neatly stacked at each seat. Curious, I glanced at the packet labeled with my name. The agenda, usually created by my executive assistant Allison, had been replaced with a new version. Item 3, innocuously titled Leadership Structure Review, confirmed my suspicions. As I flipped through the presentation slides, my stomach tightened. Rachel had prepared a comprehensive deck titled Wilson Tech Forward, a strategic realignment. The carefully crafted slides detailed perceived shortcomings in my leadership, packaged as growth limitations and innovation stagnation. Metrics had been selectively chosen to support her narrative, ignoring our steady profitability and client satisfaction scores. Board members arrived one by one, avoiding eye contact with me while exchanging familiar greetings with Rachel. I noticed Douglas Reed, our chairman, patting Rachel's shoulder reassuringly, a gesture that revealed their rehearsed coordination. When everyone was seated, I called the meeting to order with forced normalcy. following our standard procedure of reviewing previous minutes and operational updates. Rachel sat directly across from me, dressed in a sharp navy suit that contrasted with my more casual blazer and jeans, my standard work attire. Her expression remained neutral until Douglas abruptly interrupted my product development update. "I think we should move directly to item 3, he announced, looking at Rachel rather than me. "We have an important matter to discuss regarding company leadership." Rachel smoothly took control, standing to distribute additional documents as she began her clearly practiced speech. "Thank you, Douglas. As you all know, I've been increasingly concerned about our strategic direction. While Sam's technical vision launched Wilson Tech successfully, we're entering a new phase requiring different leadership." She clicked to a slide showing declining growth percentages, figures I immediately recognized as manipulated by changing the measurement intervals. "Our market penetration has slowed significantly under the current leadership approach," she continued. "Competitors are gaining ground while we remain focused on incremental technical improvements rather than bold market expansion." I watched in stunned silence as my sister systematically dismantled my reputation, portraying me as an out-of-touch technician unable to scale a business. She presented selective client feedback highlighting implementation delays, conveniently omitting that these delays stemmed from her team's unrealistic promises. She framed my cautious approach to data security as paranoia that hampered user experience and my ethical stance on patient consent as idealistic obstacles to monetization opportunities. The performance was masterful. Rachel had always excelled at persuasion. She made my strengths sound like weaknesses and presented my principal decisions as business liabilities. Most disturbingly, she positioned herself as the reluctant truth-teller, forced to act for the company's survival despite her personal connection to me. When she finished, Douglas immediately opened the floor for board discussion, but it quickly became apparent this was merely theater. Board member Catherine Harris recited concerns about my communication style that mirrored Rachel's presentation almost verbatim. Michael Thompson expressed growing alarm about my resistance to strategic partnerships I had never been consulted about. I attempted to respond, presenting accurate growth figures and explaining the ethical reasoning behind decisions Rachel had framed as business failures. The board members listened with polite disinterest, their minds clearly made up before I'd spoken a word. "I think we've heard enough to make an informed decision," Douglas announced after barely 15 minutes of discussion. "I move that we vote on the proposed leadership change to appoint Rachel Wilson as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately." The vote was devastating in its unanimity, 4 hands raised against me, with only my own in opposition. Rachel couldn't contain her triumphant smile as Douglas officially announced the result. "The board has voted. Samantha Wilson is removed as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. Rachel Wilson is appointed as the new CEO with full executive authority." His formal tone couldn't disguise his satisfaction. Rachel stood, straightening her already immaculate suit. "I want to thank the board for their confidence. I promise to lead Wilson Tech into a new era of growth and opportunity." Then she turned to me, her professional mask slipping to reveal the gloating beneath. "The board voted. You're out." She smirked, flipping her blonde hair with practiced casualness. "I'm the new CEO now." Despite the sickening betrayal constricting my chest, I maintained the calm demeanor Lawrence and I had practiced. I gathered my papers slowly, closed my laptop, and stood with deliberate dignity. "Congratulations on your new position," I said evenly. "Just one thing you might want to review. Check page 394 of the company contract." Rachel's smile faltered momentarily before she dismissed my comment with a wave. "Always hiding behind technicalities, Sam. This is why the company needs new leadership. You can clear out your office by the end of the day. Security will assist you." The word security hit like a physical blow. Not only was I being removed from my position, but I was being treated as a potential threat to the very company I had built from nothing. I noticed Brian, our CFO, wincing at this unnecessary cruelty, but he remained silent. As I walked out of the boardroom, Rachel was already discussing office reorganization. claiming my corner office as her own. 2 security guards, unfamiliar faces likely hired specifically for this purpose, waited outside to escort me to my office. Employees watched in shocked silence as I was marched through the open workspace like a criminal. In my office, I found boxes already stacked beside my desk. Allison stood nearby, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't know," she whispered. "They only told me this morning to prepare these." I hugged her briefly. "It's not your fault. But I need you to do something important." I slipped her a sealed envelope. "Give this to Brian in exactly 2 hours, not before." Under the watchful eyes of the security guards, I packed personal photos and a few mementos, leaving behind company equipment and files. As a final act, I removed the small framed photo of Rachel and me at the company's first anniversary celebration, the one where we had toasted to changing healthcare together, and placed it in the trash can. As I was escorted from the building I had chosen, designed, and filled with brilliant people working toward a mission I believed in, Rachel watched from the doorway of what had been my office. Her expression wasn't of someone who had won a victory, but of someone already planning their next conquest. She had no idea what was coming. The first 24 hours after being ousted from Wilson Tech passed in a blur of grief and anger. I alternated between rage cleaning my apartment, sobbing into a pint of ice cream, and staring numbly at the ceiling. By the second day, however, it was time to activate the contingency plan Lawrence and I had prepared. 6 months earlier, when I first noticed Rachel's ambitious maneuvering, I had met with Lawrence to discuss worst-case scenarios. His office, with its mahogany shelves and leather chairs, had provided a sanctuary away from Wilson Tech where we could speak freely. "The first rule of corporate warfare," Lawrence had said, leaning forward with intense focus, "is to prepare your defenses before they're needed. Once the attack begins, it's too late." Together, we had methodically analyzed Wilson Tech's corporate structure, identifying vulnerabilities and strengths. The company's most valuable assets were its intellectual property, the algorithms, architecture, and interface designs that made Patient Connect superior to competitors. Lawrence's brilliant strategy had been to separate these assets from the operating company. "Here's what we'll do," he had explained, sketching a diagram on his legal pad. "We'll create a separate entity, Wilson Innovation Labs, that will own all the core IP. This entity will be solely owned by you and will license the technology to Wilson Tech under specific conditions." This arrangement, detailed on page 394 of our company contract, specified that the license would remain in force only under certain conditions, including my continued leadership role. If I were removed without proper cause, the license would automatically convert to a restricted, expensive arrangement that would severely limit Wilson Tech's ability to develop or modify the technology. I had also taken another precaution that even Lawrence didn't fully know about. Over the past year, as Rachel's ambition became more apparent, I had cultivated deeper relationships with our most talented team members. Private lunches, honest conversations about company direction, and genuine interest in their professional development had created bonds of loyalty that went beyond typical employer-employee relationships. Now it was time to leverage those relationships. On the 3rd day after my removal, I sent a simple text message to 12 key employees. "Lighthouse Coffee, 7 a.m. tomorrow." By 7:15 the next morning, Lighthouse Coffee's back room was filled with Wilson Tech's most valuable talent. Madison Clark, our lead developer, arrived first, followed by Tyler Patterson from operations, and 9 others representing every crucial department. They came despite the risk to their positions, driven by curiosity and, I hoped, loyalty. "Thank you for coming," I began once everyone had coffee. "I won't waste your time. You all know I was removed as CEO. What you don't know is that I anticipated this possibility and made preparations." I explained the IP licensing situation and my plans to start a new company focused on the next generation of healthcare data solutions. Then I asked the question that would determine everything. How many of you would consider joining me in this new venture? The unanimous show of hands brought the first real smile to my face since the board meeting. These weren't just employees. They were believers in the mission we had built together. Within 48 hours, all 12 had submitted their resignations to Wilson Tech, citing concerns about company direction in their exit interviews. Their departures triggered an exodus as word spread about my new venture. By the end of the week, 27 key employees had resigned, nearly half of Wilson Tech's critical technical and operational talent. Rachel's increasingly frantic calls began on day 5, when the pattern became undeniable. I let them go to voicemail, listening to her messages evolve from confused to angry to desperately conciliatory. "Sam, what the hell is happening? People are quitting left and right." The first message, tense but controlled. "This is sabotage and you know it. You're deliberately trying to damage the company." The fifth message, accusatory and hostile. "Please, Sam, we need to talk. Whatever issues you have, we can work them out. The company is suffering." The ninth message, finally acknowledging her vulnerability. I responded only by text with a single message, page 394. "Have your lawyers review it carefully." Meanwhile, Lawrence delivered formal notices to Wilson Tech's remaining board members, informing them of the automatic conversion of the IP license and its new, restrictive terms. The document detailed how any modifications to the existing codebase would require explicit approval from Wilson Innovation Labs, with substantial fees for each approved change. Our client relationships proved to be another area where Rachel had miscalculated. While she had focused on cultivating board members and potential acquirers, I had built genuine connections with the healthcare professionals who used our system daily. Jessica Fletcher, the office manager who had given us our first chance, now directed IT for a network of clinics. Dr. Benjamin Harris, who had championed our implementation at Boston General, had become their chief medical information officer. These relationships, built on trust and consistent delivery, proved invaluable. When I reached out to key clients to explain the situation, their responses were overwhelmingly supportive. Several immediately expressed concerns about continuing with Wilson Tech under the new leadership. Within 2 weeks, 3 major hospital systems had initiated contract review procedures, the first step toward potential termination. The patent situation proved to be Rachel's most significant oversight. In her rush to seize control, she had failed to thoroughly investigate the legal structure of our intellectual property. The core technology that made Patient Connect function, the secure transfer protocols, the interoperability framework, the encryption methodology, was legally owned by Wilson Innovation Labs, not Wilson Tech itself. Rachel's desperate attempts to salvage the situation grew more evident daily. She hired an expensive law firm to challenge the IP arrangement, only to have them confirm its legal validity. She attempted to recruit replacement talent, but the specialized nature of our work meant qualified candidates were scarce and wary of joining a company in obvious turmoil. 2 weeks after my removal, I scheduled meetings with Wilson Tech's primary investors. Over careful lunches in private dining rooms, I explained the situation with complete transparency, including my plans for a new venture. Rather than seeking to damage Wilson Tech further, I presented myself as concerned about the investors' returns and willing to discuss solutions that could preserve value for all stakeholders. "The current arrangement isn't sustainable," I told Nathaniel Jordan, our lead investor, as we finished dessert. "Rachel lacks the technical understanding to navigate the IP restrictions, and the talent exodus has created critical gaps in institutional knowledge." "What are you suggesting?" he asked, his expression guarded but interested. "I'm open to discussions about acquisition terms for Wilson Tech's client relationships and remaining assets," I replied. "My new company needs customers, and your investment needs salvaging. There might be a mutually beneficial arrangement." As these conversations progressed, Rachel made her most desperate move. She attempted to continue product development without access to the source code modification rights. When clients reported critical bugs in the latest release, her technical team, now led by junior developers promoted beyond their experience, attempted patches that violated the licensing agreement. Lawrence's legal notice arrived at Wilson Tech the following day, outlining the violations and announcing the immediate suspension of all licenses pending legal review. In practical terms, this meant Wilson Tech could no longer legally provide updates or modifications to any client installations. Board members who had so confidently voted for my removal began to realize the magnitude of their miscalculation. Douglas Reed, the chairman who had orchestrated the vote with Rachel, reached out through intermediaries seeking a private discussion about finding an amicable resolution. I declined, directing all communication through Lawrence. The final piece of my counter-strategy involved the media. Rather than publicly attacking Rachel or Wilson Tech, I gave a single, carefully crafted interview to a respected healthcare technology publication. In it, I expressed disappointment at the unexpected leadership change, but emphasized my continuing commitment to improving healthcare outcomes through technology innovation. The article announced my new venture, Horizon Health Technologies, and hinted at revolutionary advances in development. The contrast between this professional, mission-focused interview and Rachel's increasingly panicked statements to the press created a narrative that required no additional commentary. Industry observers could draw their own conclusions about which leader was equipped to deliver on promises to clients and patients. By the 1-month mark after my removal, the situation had become untenable for Rachel. Wilson Tech's stock price had dropped by 60%, client confidence was shattered, talent continued to leave, and the technical limitations imposed by the licensing restrictions prevented meaningful product development. What she had imagined as her triumphant rise to power had instead become a lesson in the importance of reading the fine print. Rachel's first month as CEO of Wilson Tech unfolded like a slow-motion train wreck that no one had the power to stop. Without the core technical team, even basic system maintenance became problematic. Clients reported increasing issues with performance and reliability, while Rachel's hastily assembled replacement team struggled to understand the complex architecture that Madison and her developers had built over years. The breaking point came when Boston Memorial Hospital experienced a 4-hour system outage during a busy Monday morning. Dr. Amanda Perry, their chief of medicine, called Rachel directly, bypassing the customer service channels in her fury. "We have surgeries delayed, medication orders backed up, and doctors unable to access critical patient information." She shouted loud enough that employees near Rachel's office could hear every word. "This is exactly what Sam promised would never happen with your system." Rachel's assurances that the problems would be fixed very soon rang hollow. Without access to modify the core code base under the restricted license, her technical team could only implement temporary workarounds that addressed symptoms rather than causes. Each patch introduced new complications, creating a cascade of escalating issues. Meanwhile, Horizon Health Technologies, my new company, took shape with remarkable speed. The core team I had brought from Wilson Tech allowed us to skip the typical early-stage struggles of establishing processes and defining culture. We moved directly into product development, leveraging our collective knowledge while avoiding the mistakes we'd made the first time around. Our office, a converted warehouse in Cambridge with exposed brick and abundant natural light, buzzed with the energy of a team united by shared purpose and the determination born from collective experience. Madison led our development team with increased authority, implementing the architectural improvements she had advocated for at Wilson Tech, but that had been repeatedly delayed by Rachel's marketing priorities. Lawrence initiated the legal proceedings we had discussed, filing a complaint alleging corporate malfeasance and breach of fiduciary duty by Rachel and the board members. The detailed documentation I had maintained, emails, meeting recordings, financial records, provided compelling evidence of Rachel's systematic campaign to undermine my leadership and her financial improprieties. The most damning evidence came from Rachel herself. In her haste to seize control, she had used her company email for planning the coup, creating a searchable record of her machinations. These communications, obtained through legal discovery, revealed the extent of her deception and the promises she had made to board members in exchange for their support. Media coverage intensified as details emerged. Technology publications ran feature stories analyzing the Wilson Tech implosion, while business journals published cautionary tales about family business dynamics and proper corporate governance. Industry analysts questioned how the board could have approved such a risky leadership change without adequate technical transition planning. The personal dimensions of the betrayal became public when our parents finally broke their silence. Initially, they had attempted to remain neutral, devastated by the conflict between their daughters. But as Rachel's actions came to light, particularly her financial misrepresentations, they could no longer maintain this position. "We raised our daughters to value integrity above all else," my father told a journalist who caught him leaving his office. "What Rachel did violates everything we believe in. We're heartbroken. But we stand with Samantha." Their public support, while personally meaningful, added another layer of complexity to an already painful situation. Rachel's professional reputation deteriorated rapidly as former colleagues distanced themselves. Marketing executives who had once eagerly networked with her now ignored her messages. Speaking invitations were rescinded. The carefully crafted personal brand she had built over years crumbled in a matter of months. The financial consequences for Rachel and the board members proved substantial. As Wilson Tech's stock price plummeted, shareholder lawsuits accumulated, naming them personally for their failure to perform due diligence before the leadership change. Directors' and officers' insurance covered some liabilities, but the personal and professional damage couldn't be insured against. Horizon Health Technologies, meanwhile, gained momentum with each passing week. Our first product, an enhanced version of the patient data management system I had originally envisioned, attracted attention from healthcare providers frustrated with Wilson Tech's deteriorating service. Our development timeline promised delivery within 6 months, an ambitious but achievable goal given our experienced team. For months after my removal from Wilson Tech, Rachel requested a meeting. After consulting with Lawrence, I agreed to meet at a neutral location, a private room at the Four Seasons Hotel where we could speak without public scrutiny. I arrived early, choosing a seat facing the door so I could watch her entrance. Rachel appeared exactly on time, her usual impeccable appearance noticeably diminished. The designer clothes remained, but stress had left visible marks, dark circles under her eyes, tension in her jaw, a certain dullness to her once gleaming hair. She hesitated briefly upon seeing me, then straightened her shoulders and approached with a shadow of her former confidence. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, setting her handbag carefully on the table between us. "I imagine you're enjoying watching everything fall apart." "That's not why I'm here, Rachel," I replied evenly. "What did you want to discuss?" She took a deep breath, visibly struggling with what came next. "The board is considering options for Wilson Tech's future. We've received several acquisition offers, all significantly below what the company was worth before the changes. Before you orchestrated my removal," I clarified, refusing to let her minimize what had happened. "Yes." She looked down briefly before meeting my eyes again. "The highest offer is from Medcore Solutions. They're primarily interested in the client relationships since the technology license issues make the platform itself less valuable." I nodded, having already heard about these offers through industry channels. "And you're telling me this because any acquisition would require resolution of the IP situation," she admitted. "The potential buyers need assurance that the technology licenses can be renegotiated to workable terms." The conversation that followed revealed the full extent of Rachel's miscalculation. She had assumed that controlling Wilson Tech would give her leverage over the technology itself, never understanding the careful legal separation I had established. She had imagined a quick victory followed by an immediate acquisition that would make her wealthy and enhance her professional reputation. Instead, she found herself presiding over a declining asset with increasingly limited options. "I made a mistake," she finally said, the words clearly difficult for her. "I thought I could run the company better. I thought your technical focus was limiting our potential. I was wrong." The admission should have felt satisfying vindication after months of pain and rebuilding. Instead, it merely emphasized the senselessness of it all. An unnecessary betrayal. A destroyed relationship, a damaged company that had been helping real patients, all because Rachel couldn't see beyond her ambition. It's not just me you need to apologize to, I told her. It's the employees whose careers you disrupted, the clients whose trust you betrayed, the patients who depend on functioning systems for their care. I stood, gathering my coat. I'll have Lawrence contact Wilson Teka's attorneys about potential arrangements that might facilitate an acquisition. Beyond that, I have nothing more to say to you personally. As I walked away, Rachel called after me, Sam, we're still sisters. Doesn't that mean anything? I paused at the door, turning back one last time. You should have thought about that before you decided to steal my company. 1 year after the infamous board meeting that changed everything, I stood at the window of Horizon Health Technologies' new headquarters, watching autumn leaves swirl across the courtyard. Our team had grown to over 100 employees, with more joining weekly. Our flagship product had launched to critical acclaim, and our client list included many former Wilson Tech customers who had switched after experiencing the difference in service quality and innovation. The acquisition of Wilson Teka's remains had finalized 3 months earlier, a bittersweet conclusion to the company I had built from nothing. In the end, Horizon purchased the client contracts and remaining assets for approximately 1/10 of what MedTech Global had offered before Rachel's takeover attempt. The board members who had so confidently voted for my removal faced significant financial losses and ongoing legal challenges from shareholders. Rachel's professional reputation lay in ruins. No technology company would hire her for an executive position after trade publications documented her failed leadership at Wilson Tech. She had retreated from public view, reportedly moving to Chicago to work for a friend's marketing agency in a much lower position than she had once enjoyed. Our parents had struggled to navigate the aftermath of the conflict between their daughters. Initially, they attempted to mediate, inviting us both to family dinners that Rachel attended and I declined. Eventually, they came to understand the magnitude of her betrayal and stopped pressuring me for reconciliation. Last month, they had visited Horizon's offices for the first time, my father's eyes filling with tears as he saw what we had built from the ashes of Wilson Tech. I'm sorry we didn't see what was happening, my mother had said, hugging me tightly. We should have recognized the warning signs with Rachel. We should have protected you better. It wasn't your responsibility, I assured her. Though part of me had indeed wished they had intervened sooner, had questioned Rachel's sudden interest in my company once it became successful. These were conversations we were slowly having, rebuilding our relationship with new boundaries and clearer understanding. The lessons from the experience had profoundly shaped my approach to business leadership. I now trusted my instincts more readily when something felt wrong, rather than dismissing concerns to maintain harmony. Documentation had become a non-negotiable practice. All conversations, decisions, and agreements were recorded and stored securely. Most importantly, I had learned to balance focusing on product excellence with maintaining awareness of the political dynamics around me. The culture at Horizon reflected these lessons. Our company values emphasized both innovation and integrity, with transparency as a core principle. We had implemented shared ownership structures that gave key employees meaningful equity stakes, aligning everyone's interests toward long-term success rather than quick exits. Our board included technical experts alongside business leaders, ensuring balanced decision-making that considered all perspectives. Madison Clark, now our Chief Technology Officer, had thrived with expanded responsibilities. Her technical vision, previously constrained by Rachel's marketing-focused priorities, now shaped our product roadmap. Tyler Patterson had built an operations team that functioned with remarkable efficiency. Brian Taylor, who had eventually left Wilson Tech to join us as CFO, had implemented financial controls that ensured complete transparency. The most unexpected development came 6 months after the acquisition, when Rachel emailed requesting a meeting. After considerable thought, I agreed to see her at a neutral location, a quiet cafe near the public garden. She arrived looking different than I remembered, her designer clothes replaced by simpler attire, her once perfect manicure now practical and unpolished. The confident swagger had disappeared, replaced by a more tentative demeanor. "Thank you for seeing me," she began. "I know you have every reason to refuse. Why did you want to meet?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "I've been in therapy," she said directly, trying to understand why I did what I did. "It's not an excuse, but I've realized how much of my life has been driven by competing with you. You were always the smart one, the responsible one. I was the charming one, the social one. When your company became successful, I couldn't stand that you had excelled in an area where I thought I would dominate, building relationships, making connections." I listened without interrupting as she continued, explaining the jealousy and insecurity that had fueled her actions. She didn't ask for forgiveness or for a role at Horizon, which would have immediately ended the conversation. Instead, she simply wanted me to understand her perspective and to know that she recognized the gravity of her betrayal. "I don't expect us to be close again," she concluded. "But I hope someday we might be able to be in the same room without this terrible weight between us." I didn't offer immediate forgiveness or promises of reconciliation. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal too fundamental. But I did acknowledge her effort to understand her actions and committed to keeping the door open for possible future conversations. This unexpected olive branch represented my final lesson from the experience, distinguishing between forgiveness and forgetting. I would never forget Rachel's betrayal or fully trust her again. But holding on to anger served no purpose beyond causing continued pain. Limited forgiveness, offered carefully, with appropriate boundaries, allowed me to release the bitterness that might otherwise have colored my future relationships and business decisions. Today, Horizon Health Technologies stands as living proof that setbacks, even devastating ones, can become foundations for greater success. Our technology helps more patients than Wilson Tech ever reached. Our culture attracts top talent who value both innovation and integrity. Our financial performance exceeds all projections, creating security for employees who took risks to join a startup born from corporate betrayal. The fine print that Rachel overlooked didn't just protect my legal interests, it revealed our different approaches to business and life. She sought shortcuts to success, skimming documents and dismissing details in her rush to claim glory. I built methodically, attending to fundamentals and creating genuine value before seeking recognition. In the end, the contrast in our approaches determined the outcome more decisively than any legal clause could have alone. If you've experienced betrayal in business or personal relationships, remember that the foundation you build matters more than any single setback. Document everything, trust your instincts when something feels wrong, and never sign anything you haven't thoroughly reviewed, especially when family is involved. The fine print might just save your future. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted in business? How did you recover and rebuild? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story helped you think differently about protecting your own ventures, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might benefit from these hard-learned lessons. Thank you for joining me on this journey from betrayal to rebuilding. I'm grateful for each of you in this amazing community.